In October 1962, the world came closer to nuclear annihilation than ever before or ever since. For 13 days, humanity waited on the edge of destruction, while two men, armed with enough weapons to erase civilization, stared each other down. This is the story of the moment the world almost ended, the Cuban Missile Crisis. It began with a secret. In the early 1960s, the Cold War was at its peak. The United States and the Soviet Union were locked in a global struggle for power, influence, and survival. The Americans had placed nuclear missiles in Turkey, weapons that could strike Moscow within minutes. The Soviets needed a counterbalance. So Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev made a bold and dangerous decision. He would place nuclear missiles in Cuba, just 90 miles from the United States. Cuba, led by Fidel Castro, had recently survived a CIA-backed invasion at the Bay of Pigs. Castro believed another attack was coming, and he agreed to host Soviet nuclear weapons to protect his revolution. By the summer of 1962, Soviet ships carrying missiles, warheads, and soldiers secretly crossed the Atlantic. Thousands of troops landed in Cuba disguised as agricultural workers. Missile launch sites rose quickly, hidden under camouflage netting and palm trees. No one in the United States knew. Until October 14th, on that day, an American U-2 spy plane flew over Cuba and captured photographs that confirmed the unthinkable. The Soviet Union was installing nuclear missiles capable of striking almost every major American city. President John F. Kennedy was briefed the next morning. The room fell silent. If these missiles became operational, the balance of power would shift overnight. Kennedy immediately formed a secret group of advisors known as XCOM, and together, they faced the most dangerous question of the Cold War. How do you stop a nuclear threat without starting a nuclear war? Many military leaders urged an immediate airstrike, a surprise attack to destroy the missiles before they became operational. Some even recommended a full-scale invasion of Cuba. But Kennedy hesitated. A surprise U.S. attack could kill Soviet soldiers. Khrushchev might retaliate. And one step in the wrong direction could ignite World War III. So Kennedy chose a different strategy, a naval blockade. He called it a quarantine to avoid making it sound like an act of war. On October 22nd, Kennedy addressed the world on television. Calm, firm, and unmistakably serious, he announced that the United States would intercept all Soviet ships carrying weapons to Cuba. He demanded that the Soviets remove the missiles already on the island. The world stopped breathing. For the next week, Soviet ships steamed toward the U.S. blockade line. Nuclear forces on both sides were raised to their highest levels. American B-52 bombers took to the sky armed with hydrogen bombs. Submarines lurked in the Atlantic. The world waited for the moment when two superpowers would collide. On October 24th, the first Soviet ships neared the blockade. American warships prepared to intercept. The world braced for the spark that would end everything. Then the Soviet ships slowed and turned back. It was the first sign that Khrushchev was willing to negotiate. But the crisis was far from over. Missiles in Cuba were still being assembled, and Castro, fearing an American invasion, urged the Soviets to launch a nuclear strike if necessary. Meanwhile, an American U-2 spy plane was shot down over Cuba, killing the pilot and pushing tensions to breaking point. Kennedy was urged again to retaliate. He refused. Behind the scenes, U.S. and Soviet officials worked desperately to find a way out. Finally, a deal emerged. The Soviet Union would dismantle and remove its missiles from Cuba. In return, the United States would publicly promise not to invade Cuba and quietly agree to remove its missiles from Turkey. On October 28, 1962, Khrushchev announced that he would withdraw his missiles. The crisis was over. The world had survived. But the lessons were profound. The Cuban Missile Crisis showed how close humanity can come to destruction when fear, pride, and miscalculation collide. It forced the superpowers to install new communication systems, including the famous Washington-Moscow hotline, to prevent misunderstandings that could lead to catastrophe. For 13 days, the world held its breath. For 13 days, the fate of humanity hung on a razor's edge. And for 13 days, two nations learned that in the nuclear age, there are no winners in war, only survivors. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the most dangerous moment of the Cold War, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. History reminds us where we've been and warns us where we might go.